Good day, everyone. We are Group 5 and will be reporting on sensory processing disorder. My group mates are Maniago and Tayanes. So, our objectives for today is to discuss the etiology, signs and symptoms, prevalence and incidence, types, course, prognosis, management, existing support, and relation to SLP for SPD.
So first off, we have SPD. It is formerly known as sensory integration dysfunction. So just to highlight sensory processing. So of course, there are difficulties in organizing and responding to information that comes through our senses. So commonly identified in children, but may also occur on adults. So here is a day in the life of a child with SPD.
I choose my favorite soft clothes without tags. I can't grasp the zipper to my sweatshirt, so mom helps me. I have plain toast for breakfast. Mom cuts strawberries, but I don't like the small seeds. During group work, my teacher tells me to pay attention. The other students are talking and moving so much. I cannot concentrate. The lunchroom is so loud. I feel anxious and put on my headphones. I try to eat my lunch, but the smells in the lunchroom make me gag. I'm doing my homework when my little brother starts to cry. I yell at my brother to stop crying. My mom sends me to my room. It's hard to find a comfortable spot in bed. My mind is so busy. I can't fall asleep. My mom covers me with a heavy blanket, and I finally drift off. If your child experiences sensory processing struggles,
Okay, so for its etiology, it's not exactly defined, but researchers are looking into the biological issues, or some have suggested that it's inherited or genetics, or maybe due to prenatal birth complications and environmental factors. So its prevalence and incidence, it commonly occurs in boys than girls, and the estimated incidence is 5% to 16% of children. So for signs, symptoms, and pathomechanics, SPD may affect senses like sight, smell, touch, and sound. And you have to consider two things: the trigger and, of course, the type of sensory processing challenge the child has, because it varies, like what the trigger is, and it also varies if you're more sensitive to like sight or maybe it be sound. So let's watch this video.
One in every 6 children experience sensory symptoms that interfere with everyday functioning. These symptoms are defined as either hypersensitivity or hyposensitivity to sensory stimuli. Hypersensitivity symptoms include extreme response to sudden high-pitched noises, fearful of surprise touch, avoiding hugs, poor balance. Hyposensitivity symptoms include constant need to touch people or textures, unintentionally harms other children or pets when playing, fidgeting, moving constantly. If your child struggles with sensory processing, bring
Okay, so in detail, the video mentioned hypersensitivity and hyposensitivity. One thing to note is that some kids may be sensory seeking in certain situations and sensory avoiding in other situations. So if the child is hypersensitive in a situation, the child is known to be more on sensory avoiding, wherein the child is easily overwhelmed to such as like sounds or textures or odors, seeks quiet spots, easily startled, annoyance on bright light, avoids touching or hugging people, refuses to try new foods, and gets upset about small changes. Whereas if the child is hyposensitivity in a certain situation or sensory seeking, he likes to constantly touch and high tolerance for pain and so on and so forth. I think the video covered it on my side. So here are other signs. We even have here difficulty with speech, language skills, or social skills, and learning difficulties or delays in academic achievement. So I think that would be further discussed later on.
Now, on to the types of sensory processing disorders. We have three types. First is the sensory modulation disorder. This is when an individual either over-responds or under-responds to a sensory information. So there's a problem with They're turning sensory messages into controlled behavior that matches the nature and intensity of the sensory information. So, children with this disorder may appear frequently anxious, stubborn, or on edge. And next, we have the sensory based motor disorder. This is related to one's motor planning. So, individuals with this disorder may exhibit problems with motor planning. They usually have a problem with stabilizing, moving, or planning a series of movements in response to sensory demand. And lastly, we have sensory discrimination disorder. Individuals with this disorder usually have difficulty distinguishing between specific characteristics and details of different sensory information. In other words, they have a problem with sensing similarities and differences between sensations. For course and prognosis, since the etiology of this disorder hasn't been exactly defined, children with sensory processing disorder often have problems with skills and other abilities needed for school success and childhood accomplishments. As a result, they almost always suffer from emotional, social, and educational problems, including the inability to make friends or be part of a group, poor self concept, academic failure, and being labeled clumsy, uncooperative, belligerent, disruptive, or out of control. Anxiety, depression, aggression, or other behavior problems can follow. And as they grow into adulthood, untreated sensory processing disorder can affect an individual's ability to succeed in marriage, work, and community social environments. For management of sensory processing disorder, medication is not recommended to treating SPD. However, treatment is usually done through therapy. Research shows that starting therapy early is key for treating SPD. Therapy can help children how to manage their challenges. So, we have a specific therapy for SPD, that is the sensory integration therapy. It this type of therapy uses fun activities in a controlled environment. With the therapist, the child experiences stimuli without feeling overwhelmed. They can develop coping skills for dealing with that stimulus. Through this therapy, these coping skills can become a regular, everyday response to stimuli. Now, for the critical members of the management team, we have, of course, the primary care providers. They are to monitor growth, development, medical concerns, and provide care. Next, we have speech and language therapists or speech and language pathologists. They are to help these children communicate by teaching them functional communication skills. We then have occupational therapists. They are to evaluate children with sensory processing disorder and provide sensory integration therapy and focus on making SPD easier to manage in day-to-day life. We have also have the optometrists. They can provide vision therapy to improve eye motor skills for people who have trouble reading or writing. And lastly, we have the psychotherapist. Psychotherapy for people who have developed a mood disorder or anxiety because of SPD. For medical precautions for speech language therapy, the SLP should always keep in mind that they should give advance notice of change to routine. They may also use visual cues to reduce anxiety regarding expectations of tasks, to support routine, and to introduce new or in change in tasks. They also need to use sensory diet as to maintain an optimal alertness level. What is sensory diet? It is a carefully designed series of physical activities and accommodations tailored to give each child the sensory input they need to feel just right, which then can help them pay attention to school, learn new skills, and socialize with other kids. An example of this is giving a child with low arousal physical activities such as jumping jacks, bouncing on a therapy ball, and etc. Devices such as fidget toys or weighted blankets are also helpful in providing sensory input to the child.
Good day, everyone. My name is Maxine Sky, and I will be continuing the report on SPD support groups. Unfortunately, there weren't much SPD support groups here in the Philippines, and there were some. There were other Facebook groups that had support groups for children or for people with SPD, but unfortunately, they were private groups, and to be able to be part of the group, you had to at least have a child who has SPD, or at least um, a relative, or you yourself. So despite of not being able to find a SPD support group here in the Philippines, I found a a support group that advocates for SPD. So it is the Sensory Processing Disorder Parent Support, or the SPDPS. This is a community created 10 years ago and founded by Jeanette Baker Loftus, and she thought of making this or creating this group page when she had a daughter who was diagnosed with SPD. So, this is a parent support group aiming to spread SPD awareness and provide support and guidance to families with the same experiences. And they would usually conduct giveaways and contests, and as a prize, they offered SPD toys or clothing or things that will be essential for SPD patients and their families as well. So here are the social media accounts of the SPD Parent Support, or so they have an Instagram account, which is the at Sensory Processing SPDPS. So this is the homepage. There are a lot of posts there, a lot of very inspiring and encouraging posts. And then they also have a Facebook page, which is this one. This is the Sensory Processing Disorder Parent Support by Jeanette Loftus. So yun. And then as you can see here below, there is a link that I placed. This is the link tree sensory processing SPDPS, which is actually found here in the bio of the Instagram page of this account. So when you click this, basically you are redirected to different links. So these are the different links that will be found when you press this link tree. Okay, so here you can see that there are a lot of very helpful links, such as um, sensory autism, chewable toys and tools, sensory friendly clothing, because diba, when your child has SPD, it's either they are hyporeactive or hyperreactive or hyposensitive rather. So there are specific things that are not so stimulating for them and too stimulating for them. So there are a lot of links here. We also have sensory processing disorder, aromatherapy and essential oils. We have sensory calming activities, and so much more. There are a whole lot of links linked down in this link. So this is very useful for SPD patients and as well as their families. So next, let's proceed to the problems that arise in relation to SPD. So now let's start with the speech and language problems. So basically, um, the speech and language is delayed when you have SPD due to hypo or hypersensitivity to current environment. So since it's either the environment is too stimulating that um, they cannot grasp the opportunity for learning, or it's not stimulating at all, that's why they cannot also comprehend. So next we have the hearing impairment. Since this is a sensory processing disorder, naturally, since hearing is a sensation, a child may have APD or CAPD, or the central auditory processing disorder, which is a difficulty in interpreting and processing heard auditory information. And then next, for swallowing difficulties, children or patients or clients with SPD often have feeding issues. It's either they are really picky eaters, and this is due to the sensation. Example, they do not want foods to touch, or may have aversions to taste and texture, and refusal of food due to odors. So basically, um, this is because of their auditory, because of their sensations, that they have a difficulty in swallowing or putting food in their mouth. So that is it for our report. Thank you for listening.